Okay, I think we're ready, Carrie.
Ready? Great. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June 21st Public Design Commission meeting. If you are watching via YouTube right now, you can find the links to the agenda with the presentations and instructions for giving public testimony in the description below the video. If you would like to testify, please be sure to sign up on the form. You can find a link to that form in the agenda and below the video description. Okay, Signe, we're ready.
Good morning. My name is Signe Nielsen, President of the Public Design Commission. We will begin the meeting with a roll call to confirm commissioner attendance. When I call your name, if you could please say here. Phil Ahrens.
Here.
Ken Seth Armstead.
Here.
Lori Hawkinson.
Here.
Deborah Martin.
Here.
Karen Keel.
Here.
Ethel Sheffer.
Here.
Merrill Tisch.
Here.
Mary Valverde.
Here.
Thank you very much. We have a quorum. So we'll now begin the public meeting with a vote on the consent agenda. We're voting on items numbers 27804 to 27825. Please note my recusal on item 27814. Are there any other recusals to note? No, let the record show there are no further recusals. So I'll now call for a vote. Commissioners, when I call your name, please state your vote for the consent agenda. You may approve all or reject all, or you may reject or abstain from individual projects. Phil.
Approve all.
Ken Seth.
Approve all.
Lori.
Approve all.
Deborah.
Approve all.
Karen.
Approval.
Ethel.
Approval. I think I have to.
This link is opened up.
I'm sorry. I think I have to recuse on the museum proposal. But otherwise approve.
You're talking about the public hearing item.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, that'll come later.
That's
Oh,
not on
okay,
the,
fine.
that's not on the
Otherwise, I
consent
approve.
agenda.
Okay.
Merrill.
Approve all.
Mary.
Approve all.
And myself approve all. So it's unanimous that the consent agenda has been passed. So we are now moving on to the first public hearing item, which is item 27826, an animal care center in the Bronx. Per standard procedures, the applicants will give their presentation, then public testimony will be heard, and then commissioners will ask questions, deliberate, and we will vote.
Thank you, Signe. Anya from Marvel, I believe I gave you remote control. Okay. And I believe Jonathan Marvel will give an introduction and then you can begin.
Just testing. Okay, thanks. Jonathan, go ahead. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jonathan Marvel at Marvel. We're delighted to be able to present our design for the Animal Care Center in the Bronx. It's on Bartow Avenue and Co-op City Boulevard, and on a site that's currently a parking lot. And I'll be talking for about a minute. I'll pass it to Anya Ramirez from Marvel, and she'll then pass it to Jadiel Rivera, who will talk about the landscape component. We're doing the architecture and the landscape. And I have a model with me that I wish I could be there personally to show you, but it's a beautiful building that is going to be featuring a modular gray brick, and it speaks to the Bartow Avenue as a formal entry. There's a secondary entry in the rear with the parking lot. It has a very strong sustainability component because of it's in a potential flood zone, and so we've infused the project with a 1% for Art program, and really integrated the architecture and the landscape architecture in a meaningful way to give a celebrated entrance for both the people and the visitors and the people that work there, as well as for the animals, they'll all share that a kind of a gathering space in the nucleus of the entire project. That I'll now pass to Anya for some very important details. Thank you so much for this morning's review.
All right, good morning. I'm going to get started here. I'm going to give a very quick summary on where we are, where we're heading. Today's presentation seeks approval for preliminary design of the project. Our last presentation was not in person, but was held on 3/20, a while back, prior to the city public projects being placed on hold. The project has restarted in March 2021. We are currently at design development phase. As a quick summary, this project is a 2-story, 50,000 square feet new construction that includes an animal care center and veterinary clinic, public outpatient veterinary clinic. I'm very sorry. Wildlife rehabilitation and education center, administrative offices, community room, and publicly accessible open space. The animal care center and public veterinary medical facilities will be operated by Animal Care Centers of New York City, and the project seeks to achieve LEED Silver. As Jonathan mentioned, the location is 2050 Bartow Avenue, next to Project Hope Senior Housing at the north end of Bay Plaza Shopping Center. It is bound to the north and southeast by Co-op City and within the Baychester neighborhood of the Bronx. As a side note, the property was originally marshlands and tributaries fed by the Hutchinson River and Westchester Creek, and was infilled with soil and organic materials in the 1900s. I think this is an important side note because that proves the challenge of the site. Go to the next, getting a little bit closer here. This is our site. A little bit more of aerial context. All right, in terms of our design intent, the project aspires to serve the Bronx with spaces to facilitate adoption and improve care for animals, with open spaces that encourage active street life and connect the neighborhood back to the natural environment. The building seeks to be a good neighbor and seeks to serve as an educational tool to teach the community about the relationship between humans and animals, and between humans and the environment. With our design proposal, we aspire to challenge the preconceptions of what a traditional animal shelter was and present new opportunities to connect with animals. You can see here, we have refined the concept narrative as the Animal Care Center is a natural space for shelter. It's inspired by the local split rock located on Pelham Park, where historically, people and animals, nature as well, has taken refuge with its crevices and cracks. Our project really consists of a hard shell with a soft core. A little bit here of our concept. It's evolved into a diagram. Our lot. This is our previous conceptual design slide. And our project has evolved a little bit to the better, in our opinion. The building is organized along a street that connects Bartow Avenue, and here on the left side of the page, to the mall access road to the right, via what we call Animal Lane. A wildlife rehabilitation center is located on the Bartow Avenue frontage, followed by the community facility entrance along our Animal Lane. This is about 700 square feet, so it's not too big. The main space, visible from Bartow and between a public plaza, located here, and the building courtyard, is the beacon defining entrance to the shelter and public veterinary clinic, located here. You will see more details in the renderings coming up. A service entrance for partner rescue groups, NYPD, and other agencies is located closest to the south parking area and mall access road, located back here. The arrangement inside the facility has dog housing located on the first floor for easy connection to the outdoors for daily walks. There is a we call this animal alley back here, in which dogs will have very easy access to the outside, and on the Plaza side as well. Going up the second floor, quickly up here is all fine. Over here, we have what we call the catwalk, which give you access to the cat zone and small animals. One of the main reasons why we did this was to promote fear-free design opportunities, to make sure that the predator-prey instincts don't kick in and animals feel enriched and secure in their locations. Okay, going back a little bit, if this allows me, yes. So we are also proposing to have the veterinary clinic, the public side, enter on the plaza, and the veterinary clinic of the shelter be on the back. However, they will be connected in order to support each other in the case of an emergency. Back up. I'm having issues with the back and forth, so I apologize for that. Okay, here we're on the second level. On the second level, we have the ACC Bronx offices located here, closer to the plaza. And we have the ACC headquarters on the north on Bartow. Okay, gonna go back one more time and promise this is the last time. Okay. A series of outdoor spaces weave through and around the building, connecting interior spaces to the exterior, providing easy access for animal training and adoption meets and greets, bringing daylight deep into the building and helping navigate throughout the facility to aid wayfinding and circulation. A protective fence enclosing the whole site will ensure safety of animals and humans alike. We understand that there were some comments about lighting, which were very well taken. But we have had some daylighting analysis reviewed by our consultants Atelier 10 and Tillotson. And while we can confirm that the dog housing has sufficient lighting, despite the fact that it's a rather deep footprint, we try to have a center corridor, so try to place the animals as close as possible to the exterior. It does seem that, and I'm now going to go back up and stay here, stay put. We do recognize that there are some issues with the northwest side of the ACC headquarters. However, the reason behind that is that we have a chevron shape steel bracing located here. We tried to put it at the most reasonable location. So right now what you see here is the maximum windows that we can provide to that space. Responding to your questions, we did add a window here facing south, which we think that it's, since it's south, it should help a little bit in the issue that we see here. On the animals on the second floor, which has the cats and the small animals, we intend to utilize glass partitions, and not glass only, but translucent partitions, transparent partitions, to take advantage of the light coming from the east here. And we then determined that it made more sense to make these windows 4 feet in width. Previously, they were 3 feet, keeping a module. So we think 4 feet is gonna substantially help get all that light to the cats, which cats obviously love. In addition to that, there was a thought about having solar tubes. In terms of the solar tubes, we do have, you see this is the old version. The new version, we have our air handling units in this location, and we have quite a lot of ducts actually running through this location, which would perhaps be the right place for the solar tubes. So at the moment, we are not considering them. Okay, so a little bit through our elevations, and we can talk about materials. We selected brick as the primary material for this building. It is consistent with the split rock narrative. It is durable and lends itself to be utilized in different application methods, while uniform and resilient. We're utilizing a Norman size running bond brick in a pattern that will vary in depth, recess, and protruding some of its pieces to create variety within the length of the building, define the volumes, and emphasize the relationship with the accesses via Bartow or mall access road. This would be our main side elevation, in which you have Bartow on the left and access road to the right. So you can see here that we're attempting to use the brick to sort of create a striation of the volumes and give a sense of directionality. We study other possible gray tones, and I'm going to show you here a little bit more of what we have, which you have reviewed already, showing how the brick works, our intent behind it. And as I started saying, we study other possible gray tones, both lighter and darker, but we settled on a gray brick with a slight warmth to it. I'm calling it a light French gray for several reasons. One of them, to ensure that time and weathering allows the building to age gracefully, which is always a concern. And to also remove the conventional notions of what an animal shelter looks like with bare materials similar to gray plain CMU. And also, given the commercial nature and material palette of its surroundings, this color also harmonizes best within the context. If you saw the images from the beginning, you'll see that a lot of the context lacks that human touch. So we're just trying to be a little bit more cognizant of that. This facility is meant to be a welcoming facility to all, and the relationships of animals and humans is one to be celebrated. We also complemented the use of the light warm gray brick with selective use of a metal panel in yellow. You can see here. This is another slide on our brick. You can see here a little bit of that tone. I'm gonna go back here, perhaps finish this. So we're using the metal panel in yellow to define wayfinding through the project. Also at the bulkheads here located, we're proposing to utilize a champagne colored metal panel to differentiate the upper components from the overall building mass. For this project, we utilize a landscape as part of our material palette, and the selected planting material harmonizes throughout the seasons with the man-made materials of the building. Jadiel Rivera will be speaking about that in a moment. Signage and wayfinding. I'm going to go through that right now. So one thing that we did for this project is that is somewhat different from the other projects that the city is currently working on for animal shelters, is that this building contains more than one program. So it's a little bit of a challenge and an opportunity. Right now, our building is really our container. And the container we're calling the Bronx Animal Care. It's a name that helps identify the overall purpose of the program. And each program, the Wildlife Rehabilitation and Education, Animal Shelter, Public Veterinary Clinic, and Community Center will have their own identity displayed in their storefront glass, while the overall building will be identified permanently. We have engaged the graphic design group Order to support our design efforts. The use of the yellow metal panel, you can see here, suggests directionality to the various programs. To make the building approach pedestrian friendly, we are proposing a canopy at Bartow Avenue with signage above. Additionally, we created a cover area by the entrance. You can see it back here, closest to the shelter entrance and the public clinic, to help protect from the elements and clearly define an entrance. In regards to the signage inherent to ACC, we anticipate utilizing similar naming conventions between ACC facilities. But we do not intend to copy or duplicate what has been previously done in each building layout, since it's different in how it works, and the program logistics on each of the shelters vary. The exterior signage, which you can see here, a sample, It's really attempting to give an overall like directionality and be clear of what is a campus versus each one of the programs to avoid confusing the whole building as a whole ACC facility. You see examples here of the container label, which we intend to keep permanent. This is a brick treatment. And this is a sample of how we intend to label the actual entry points of each one of the programs. Okay, so right now I'm gonna go through the renderings very quickly. You reviewed all of them at this point. But this will give you a feel of each one of the approaches to the project. This is our plaza. This is the back of Mall Access Road. And this is a view from the plaza towards the plaza facing Bartow and Animal Lane. At this moment, I'm gonna let Yadiel take the helm on this discussion. Yadiel, go ahead.
Thank you, Anya, and good morning, everyone. So like Jonathan and Anya have already explained before, from the beginning, we have developed a building and a facility that integrates both the architecture and the landscape. We thought it was important to really create a space that's very welcoming, both as an exterior space that has a presence in the neighborhood, but also in its interior and the spaces and the environment that we're creating for the animals and for the staff that works here, as well as the visitors, right? So it was important for us to create a space that's flexible and open. And you see here in this rendering, this plaza space, which will serve both as a little bit of a community space with the community facility right facing that space, as well as the main lobby entrance to the facilities and the clinic. So, you know, another thing that we wanted to make sure was that the Bartow facade or the Bartow face of the building and the facilities were felt very open and welcoming as well. So we had created a smaller space plaza here where you can stop and sit with your pet, waiting to go into the facility or, you know, right after, but also that feels open to pedestrians and you know, it leads you right into the entrance of the building through the use of landscape and color. Next. You have seen before, there is maybe two sides of the program. The exterior programming, one is that flexible open space that connects you to the community and brings the community into the facility, but also then the exterior spaces for dogs or for other animals in the shelter. And those are located, there's a few by the entry plaza. And when they're located by the entry plaza, they're screened by vegetation. And then there's a group of them also by the interior courtyard, which will host the main sort of dog agility areas, training areas. And then towards the east, and also through all of these spaces, you know, all of them throughout the day will work as quick relief areas for dogs, smaller training areas, one-on-one, sort of training spaces, and also for people to get acquainted with the dogs and the animals if, you know, they're coming to adopt. Next. The vegetation that we have chosen for the facility, you know, was a balance between a back and forth between, you know, trying to create the nice texture and the nice screening required and bring the right colors into the space to make it feel very welcome, but also have it be very low maintenance. So the majority of the plants that we have selected are very low maintenance plants. The OHMH and ACC will engage with a landscape contractor to ensure maintenance of this. So, you know, we have all sort of talked about that balance between having the right amount of landscape areas, having the right effect, have it really work as a screen between certain adjacencies, right, like the senior center and then and the mall, and at the same time, being very aware of maintenance. Yeah, there's some other elements that Anya has highlighted before. There's fencing around the site that will help ensure that during the nighttime, when this facility is still being used, there's a protected, safe space for staff, as well as for animals. So there's different levels of fencing that happen around. And if you go to the next slide, during the day when the facilities are open, we want the Bartow face to feel open and welcoming. But during the evenings and at night, when the facilities are technically closed for the public, they're still open for the staff. So there is a sense of security that goes with that. And we're proposing these fences that open up during the day and close with large panels so that it feels as much open as possible during the day. Materials, we're trying to keep them simple. We're using custom place concrete for the pavement with an exposed aggregate to create a variety of that texture along the plaza space. We're using precast concrete benches and the bollards that divide the driveway from the plaza. We are also trying to think of them as a double use. Maybe these are also seating areas. We don't want necessarily just like metal bollards, but we want them to also feel like they're part of the landscape and integrated. And then the fences, we want to keep them simple. The ones on the Bartow and Mall Access Road gate areas are simple steel slats that are transparent. And then throughout the rest of the size of the perimeter and also within the exterior animal spaces, we're using a simpler fence, omega fence or green screen that will serve the purpose. And there's some other areas where we want to make sure that we are also screening from our neighbors and protecting the dogs from our neighbors. So there's a portion that's a CMU block wall right next to where the Red Lobster is on the east side.
Yeah, in terms of lighting, here's our lighting layouts, which we can go more in detail if the commissioners desire so. This is a site plan on the more civil side of things from White Post. And a few shots of the lighting concept. And I wanted to close with something that Jonathan mentioned at the very beginning. We do have a present for art requirement on this project, which we're very happy that we do. DCLA, which is in this phone call or this meeting, can expand on the details of contracts and status. But for the commissioners, we would like to let you know that we have engaged with the artists from the very beginning during schematic. And they have given us a feedback on locations and type of art. We have not imposed anything on them necessarily. Last comment is that we do have two artists, which is not necessarily a common thing. One of them is a painter, and it will be presented later in an upcoming presentation. So that person is providing art pieces, and the other one is providing an art installation. And with this, I'm wrapping up our presentation, and hopefully this project can, satisfy everyone, both the DOHMH, ACC, as well as the DDC and the City of New York with its architecture, and also it's more important, its program. If anyone has some questions, we're open for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marvel team. Marvelous, Marvel team. Do we have any public testimony?
No, we do not, Signe.
Okay, then are there any commissioners who care to raise questions or have comments? First off, thank you for being very responsive to some of our earlier comments. Lori, Manuel, actually Manuel's not here today, is he? No.
No, he's not here.
Right.
let me unmute myself. Hi, thanks for the presentation, Anya and Jonathan. And I wanted to, yeah, thank you also for responding to comments. So I just had, I got an opportunity last week to see the samples that you sent down. We looked at them outside in the daylight, which was great. So we were looking at the brick and the metal panel with the yellow that you're proposing. And my question is, you know, there's always, everybody has differences of opinion. Of course, color is very subjective, but, you know, I mean, the yellow is fantastic. I think it's going to be really great. It's going to, you know, be, you know, kind of almost something that people can use as almost a directive kind of environmentally to direct people to the building, even as an identifier. But the brick, I was wondering if you had, because when you show your brick on the slides here, you show it as black and white, the samples, you know, you have that black and white image of all the different textures. You have like 3 to 4 different treatments, which I think is really going to be very interesting as a level of detail, as, you know, what somebody approaches the building and then they see, you know, this kind of varying level of texture that you're going to try to achieve with the brick, and also the screen walls to bring light into some of the enclosure spaces. So, you know, I think that that's going to be pretty interesting, and you're going to get the light and shadow on that. But I would like to see other brick colors, you know, other values, because the warm to me, you know, I'd like to see a bit, you call it the gray, the French gray or something. So I'm wondering if, you know, it's the one you have is quite warm. It looks more tan, actually, when you look at it outside in the daylight. It's very tan. It doesn't even look like gray. I was surprised when you were calling it gray in the presentation. So, I mean, I would love to see some at the same value. And I think the only option, there isn't just, you know, that it's going to look like concrete brick. I think there's a lot of options here. You know, there are a lot of subtleties to grays. And I think if you, you know, if you could bring some others to look at it just to see them in the daylight,
yes,
with your other materials, I think it would be great. I'd love to see that. And then I just had, you know, a great news about the artists that you've selected on, we don't know who they are, but I'm glad that they're on board. It's always great to have them as soon as possible. This is really more comment to DCLA. And I know that Kendall's always working on these things, but with DDC, but, you know, the sooner the artists get on, the better for the project, so that we're not just saying, you know, do your work here, like pointing to it like a parsley on a plate, that they can really be truly integrated into the project and the process. So it sounds like you're going to get there. The signage and wayfinding, since Emmanuel's not here, I just wanted to make a comment, being that, you know, I think that the brick treatment is also super, you know, you're going to take that texture into the signage and the calling out of, you know, what the building is. But it seems that you've got a lot of different types of signage. And I think that Manuel passed on some comments about that. And I would just reiterate that, you know, you have this pylon thing there that I see, right? That whatever that thing is there, the pylon, like what, like, do we need that when we already know where we're going? And I get to the building and I see it on the glass. I mean, just the less signage we have, the more we can, you know, minimize stuff, you know, in our world that sits around there and then breaks down and gets banged up would be great. And if we can just be, you know, I think you're doing a really beautiful job with the building and the textures and all that and the identifying of it. So I think if there was some way to even minimize some of these pylons, it would be terrific.
Yeah, we agree. Now that you sort of frame it like that, it makes sense. I think if the commissioners are sort of getting the message of the building, that is very positive. So sometimes editing, makes things clearer. So we agree with you on that. Similarly on the brick, you know, always selecting brick it's a challenge. Gray brick is even a bigger challenge. We wanna instill some warmth on the building, like I was mentioning earlier, but at the same time, we don't want it to be on the brown tones. So what we have done is that we prepare a large format brick sample so we can take a look at them, like not the 12 by 12. Jonathan had it on his background earlier, to really see if what we are intending is the case. Because yeah, if you did, you took it outside, you really looked at the nuances with the light. It's really gonna tell us where we should head. And I agree with you when I'm saying like Great French. That's what I'm hoping for. Perhaps the brick still has a little bit too much of a brown tone to it. So we can definitely fine tune that. We don't want to go cool gray, but we do want to have definitely be it's intended to be gray, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you just want to have things that you're looking at, obviously, in the day. And you guys know that in the daylight, that because things always change when you're in the natural light. And then they change when it's cloudy. I mean, you know all that too. So great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori.
Mhm.
Any other commissioners care to chime in? Okay, then I'll chime in. So I saw that in your site plan, you had an indication of protective fencing around some of the plant beds. I am, after years and years of doing this, for as much as I love animals, which I do desperately and have several, dogs in particular wreak havoc on plant beds. And especially in a place where the ethos is more about the animals than it is necessarily about the plants. So I just wanted to be sure that you had adequate protection. I didn't see it on your landscape materials palette. I did see it in plan, indicated in plan, but I didn't see it either in the renderings or in the materials palette. Can you just describe what it is?
Sorry, we need to unmute you. Yeah, also, there we go.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to. If you're referring to the way that we're sort of approaching this is that we, in the Plaza space, we're trying to sort of create in the Plaza, and then you see the round shapes are mostly to create this sort of nooks for people to be able, with a bench, for people to be able to sit when they come with a dog. Sometimes this is a stressful situation. Sometimes you're bringing a dog to the clinic or to the shelter itself, or sometimes you're adopting one and you want to have. So we're sort of trying to use the benches as a way to sort of protect that planting in some of those areas, although we want the plantings to do their thing. But then in the interiors, in the courtyard, we do have a separation of a fence between the planted zones and the play area spaces for the dogs. So we're not showing, let's say, the small fences that typically go to protect planting in these renderings, and I don't think we're showing them in the plants either. But something that we could definitely consider given, maintenance and things like that. We're trying to sort of pick the plants that will be more resilient to dogs, and also create designated areas where people actually stop with them, so that they can avoid, let's say, contact with loose dogs or anything like that.
I appreciate your plant palette. Certainly some of those junipers will be helpful in that regard. But anyway, just think about it. And as you talk more with the ACC about their maintenance capacity, I just, this is a beautiful landscape that you've created. And I just want to make sure that it, is as robust as it can be. So if I'm the last, go ahead.
If we, just to reassure that, we have been working with the OSHA and NCC throughout this process to try to sort of find that right balance between vegetated areas and and paved areas, and we will continue to do so as we move forward. So we'll try to be as efficient with the planting palette, also, very aware of the maintenance concerns. So thank you for the feedback, and I think we'll keep it on for as we develop the project.
Sure, sure. So if that's there are no further comments, we're going to vote on this project. We're voting on preliminary, and when I call your name, if you could please state your vote, and you are either going to approve, reject, table, or abstain. And if you feel that you would like to make a final comment, please do so. Phil,
Approve.
Kenseth,
Great. Approve.
Lori,
Approved.
with the caveat of seeing more options on the brick, right?
Be great.
Deborah,
Approve.
Karen,
Approve.
Ethel,
Approve.
Merrill,
Approve.
Mary,
Approve.
and myself approve. So you have received unanimous preliminary approval with just a couple of suggestions to moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now, moving on, we are going to go to the next public hearing item, which is 27827, the redesign of wayfinding and commemorative signage, including the Heritage Trail in Lower Manhattan. So per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation. We will then hear public testimony, which I gather we have, and then commissioners will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. So please proceed, whomever is.
And just in case anyone's watching via YouTube right now and you would like to give testimony on this project, you can join the meeting now. And please also sign in. The form for signing in is in the video description below the video, as well as the instructions for joining us. Thank you.
So Natalie, I believe I've given you control. There we go. And I believe Jessica Lappin will be giving an introduction.
I will. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Great. I'm actually in City Hall Park, wishing I was in your beautiful offices. So good morning. I'm Jessica Lappin. I'm president of the Downtown Alliance, which is the business improvement district in Lower Manhattan, covering roughly everything south of City Hall from river to river. So I wanted to start with just some brief background on the Heritage Trail markers and application before Natalie goes into more detail about the project. And just our main goal, and I'm sure you've seen them downtown, is to replace what are very badly deteriorating markers with new ones. And while doing that, upgrade the smaller wayfinding plaques and orientation columns that are along Broadway. The existing markers are literally rotting out. We've had to remove half a dozen already. They're an eyesore and in badly need of timely replacement. And just in terms of history, this program was erected in the mid-1990s as part of a Heritage Trails project and an initiative that was spearheaded by the Kaplan Fund. At the time, they were put in to provide some information about the historic buildings, the tourist attractions, and some other landmarks in the neighborhood. And they also provide some wayfinding as well. In 2020, there was talk of removing them for good. It was at that point that the Alliance stepped in and agreed to take over the maintenance, which we have done for over 20 years. And of course, the financial responsibility to both save and maintain them over time. But as I've said, we've come to a place where they're really in decay. And just for public safety reasons, will need to be either replaced or removed. So we started a conversation with DOT quite some time ago, followed their direction in terms of the process that brought us to you today. Just to be clear, the existing locations have been approved by DOT, determined by DOT. Of course, adding any future locations involves its own lengthy, separate DOT approval process. The Alliance does not have the authority or discretion to do that. But again, based on DOT's guidance, we're seeking to replace them as essentially in kind as possible. That is what they requested of us, just using more durable materials. And of course, while replacing the hardware, we felt this was an opportune moment to take a look at the text and to update it to sort of more modernly and appropriately reflect some of the diverse history of the neighborhood. And of course, per your guidelines, we hired a historian who's reviewed and revised and improved the panels. I wanted to speak about her for a moment. This historian is a woman of color who is affiliated with the Museum of the City of New York. She has had access to their full range of experts. This lead historian, her name is Dr. Azra Dawood, is an internationally recognized expert on architecture and on the social history of New York City. Dr. Dawood is currently the Andrew Mellon Postdoc Curatorial Fellow at the Museum of the City of New York. You have her full CV in your packets today, but under her leadership, the revised panels have new content that more appropriately, we believe, reflect Black, immigrant, LGBTQ, and other diverse histories that were not previously included in the Heritage Trail markers. And as you know, the Museum of the City of New York has a very strong record of setting a very high bar for inclusive history by presenting underrepresented histories of the city through its exhibits and projects, and her work, I believe, reflects that. Third, we presented to the Community Board 1, multiple times, and we have incorporated almost all of their suggestions into the application. We appreciated their feedback, and they did pass a supportive resolution at the full board. And lastly, before I turn it over to Natalie, I just wanted to reiterate, we have been happy to be stewards of these markers because we believe they serve an important purpose to the public. We hope that you will strongly consider and approve our application, and certainly look forward to answering your questions. Natalie?
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, commissioners. I am Natalie Armstrong, Manager of Public Spaces and Streetscape at the Downtown Alliance. I'm happy to be here this morning, and I'd like to start the presentation by orienting you to the Downtown Alliance District and the general vicinity of the wayfinding signs in Lower Manhattan, as you can see here. This map shows the location of the 26 heritage trail markers, the 15 wayfinding plaques, and 5 orientation columns that are part of this application. The application is to replace existing markers only. Here are some photos to give you a visual of the 3 signs included. Apologies about the first photo. Seems there was a glitch, but you will see a wayfinding plaque shortly. The middle photo is an orientation column. There are 5 of these along Broadway from about Wall Street to Bowling Green. And then the last image is our Heritage Trail marker sign. This is an example of what's out in the field. There are 21 of these that have a historical panel, as you see here, on one side, and on the back side is a Department of Transportation Walk NYC sign. And 5 of them do have double-sided historic panels on both sides. Here's a closer look at a wayfinding plaque that are located on Broadway near Wall Street and Exchange Place. And again, these are orientation columns that are located on Broadway at Rector Street and at Bowling Green. These are 2 examples of our heritage trail markers in the field. They are along Wall Street and Broad Street. The marker on the southeast corner actually had to be removed last year. We performed an emergency removal for public safety concerns since this marker had become unstable. Unfortunately, this has been occurring more and more often as the aging markers have fallen into disrepair. There is currently no marker at this location because the Alliance does not own any replacement signs. This leads me to my next slide, which portrays the marker's current conditions. They're now over 25 years old. The original structures are showing significant signs of aging and erosion. The bases tend to see the most erosion, as you can see here. This has caused some markers to be removed completely as a public safety issue. And also the method of applying the historical information and the maps happen via a stick-on decal, which is prone to peeling and causes frequent maintenance. Taking a look at our proposed heritage trail marker structure, you will see that the sign maintains the same look and feel as the original signs. There are a few maintenance upgrades I'd like to point out. The new signs have the ability to replace only the base, since that is the area that receives the most wear and damage. Additionally, the panels will be made out of high-pressure laminate material, which is graffiti resistant and provides a professional finish. This is a huge improvement from our current stick-on decals. The sign replacement proposal was an opportunity to also update the content of the historic panels. Our goal was to ensure that the panels represent a more inclusive and broader history of Lower Manhattan. While we are limited to specific locations, we've added content with relevant histories on Black, immigrants, LGBTQ, and other diverse histories that were not previously included on the original ones. Also, select photos have been updated to represent these inclusive histories or to replace low-quality images with high-resolution photos. For this portion of the project, we adhered to PDSide guidelines and brought on a professional historian, Dr. Aswa Dawood, from the Museum of the City of New York to review and edit all content for historical accuracy. Her expertise and the museum staff work to review, edit, approve all historical content, and we feel they have added a great value to our updated panels. This was important to provide a more extensive and inclusive portrait of the neighborhood and the communities that have called it home. The historian's credentials are included with our submission materials. On this slide, we have two examples of panels that have been updated with new information. Instead of continuing to tell the physical story about the neighborhood, we thought it was important to use the markers to share stories with the public about communities that lived, worked, and died here. For example, Civic Center, Foley Square, has been updated to discuss the role it played in the unrest, racism, and criminal justice struggle from the 19th century to today. And on the New York Stock Exchange marker, a section was added highlighting the Tontine Coffee House, which once played a role in slavery. It was where slave ship masters would register enslaved Africans they brought over to sell at the nearby slave market located on Pearl Street and Wall Street. This gives you a picture of the original Heritage Trail marker that exists today and a rendering of an older version of a map. Similarly, here are the current wayfinding plaques and orientation columns. And this drawing shows our proposed Heritage Trail marker sign. As you can see, maintaining that original design, it is engineer approved. It also offers two mounting options, one being a surface mounted option and the second being a buried base in the cases where there is distinctive pavement. This slide shows the proposed updates for the wayfinding plaques, orientation columns, and the Heritage Trail marker storyboards. The wayfinding plaques and orientation columns are proposing minimal changes. We move the red bar to the top of the sign, which unifies signage throughout the district. The design has been modernized, but maintains a similar color scheme as the current signs. Here's a rendering of an original wayfinding plaque existing along Broadway today, and with our proposed changes. It's easy to see how minimal the updates proposed here are. And it is the same with an orientation column. The column has been altered slightly to match other signage in the district. And here's an update of the Heritage Trail marker rendering. It depicts the same look and feel, but with a contemporary refresh for the historic information. I'd like to point out a few other updates to the new Heritage Trail marker storyboard design. Many of these items are direct responses to the community board's suggestions. We changed the use of downtown to Lower Manhattan throughout the signs, and we use official historic names of nearby places and destinations. We reduced the size of our logo in the bottom right corner per the condition of the community board. The Alliance has also agreed to add a QR code to the storyboards, and to develop and host a digital platform for heritage trail markers that will link to further information and nearby cultural institutions. The Alliance is allocating resources and funding for this platform, and we hope to have it available by the end of the year. Also at the top, again, the red bar unifies signage and it symbolizes the geography of Lower Manhattan. The markers maintain a similar color scheme and do have updated photos where appropriate. Next, I'd like to go through each updated heritage trail marker storyboard. In the interest of time, I'll move through these quickly, but they are all available in our application materials. We have Wall Street. 40 Wall and 48 Wall Street have a two-sided storyboard. 55 Wall Street and 20 Exchange Place, 70 Pine Street, African Burial Ground, the American Stock Exchange, 28 Liberty, Civic Center, Foley Square, Stone Street Historic District, the Equitable Building, Federal Reserve, Chamber of Commerce, and Liberty Tower have a two-sided storyboard. Francis Tavern, Hanover Square, John Street Methodist Church, Wall and Broad Streets, Federal Hall National Memorial share a two-sided historical panel. Broad Street, New York Stock Exchange, Newspaper Row, 7 and 8 State Street, Siemens Church Institute, South Street Seaport Historic District, 1 Bowling Green and the Battery, William Bartham Jeweler Clock, Woolworth Building, Old Slip, Pace University, and Daily Tribune and Theater Alley. I hope this gives you an idea of the topics covered on the locations we are allowed to post our heritage trail marker information. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you all for your time and consideration of this proposal to improve public safety, beautify the district, and ensure Lower Manhattan's story is told to generations to come. Commissioners, we are seeking your approval of this application and happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Downtown Alliance. Carrie, I believe we have some testimony.
Yes, we need to unmute. We have Todd Fine. Todd Fine's the first person on our list. You have 3 minutes.
Yes. Now, first, I'm the president of the Washington Advocacy Group. I'd first like to say that it's inappropriate to discuss the erosion of the stanchions, which is not in the PDC jurisdictions. That is considered a replacement in kind under the DOT's liaison process. So your jurisdiction is only about the text and the design of the signs. Now, some of you may see the names, the advocates for the recognition of Little Syria and the history of abolition this morning and just think we are inveterate complainers trying to meddle in city business. However, the truth is that we actually supported this proposal over just a week ago until the texts were made public just last Wednesday, which is partially why it passed the community board. Of course, no one was thrilled that the historical signage of Lower Manhattan was going to be transformed into advertisements to promote the Downtown Alliance's new corporate branding of a red stripe, as I'm sure the Design Commission isn't either. But after Community Board 1 fully rejected the proposal in April, in May, advocates accepted the Downtown Alliance's prerogative to update their existing signs, given the strong Community Board recommendations for future improvement. And we were hopeful that we could collaborate in the future. Many of the people testifying this morning actually had constructive calls with Taina Prado, the Chief of Staff of the Downtown Alliance, where we discussed the forced limitations of this proposal due to DOT and the prospects for future improvement. Thus, we were shocked and honestly, truly punched in the gut to see the formal proposal last Wednesday, which showed the Alliance had deceived both us and Community Board 1. Despite all of these calls and community board arguments and resolutions, the Alliance failed to mention that these subjects we had worked on for decades in some cases would be incorporated into these signs at the wrong locations and with inadequate and inaccurate text. I hope with the extensive testimony, you have all reviewed the signs for Bowling Green, Hanover Square, Foley Square, Wall and Broad, and 48 Wall Street. If not, these signs should be reviewed specifically this morning with the Alliance's specific justification for those texts. The Bowling Green green one-sentence mention of Little Syria is inaccurate and inadequate. It's blocks away from the actual thoroughfares, and the language is totally different from what experts would propose. This was a grave insult, and if this proposal is approved, it will set back longstanding community efforts to tell stories related to Arab American heritage properly. We also didn't expect the signs to be so awkwardly written and full of major errors and typos, which is really incomprehensible for an important project dedicated to the most historically significant location in the entire country. I detailed some of the most extreme errors in testimony sent to the commission on Friday morning, which I hope has been distributed to you and reviewed. The Little Syria and the immigration history of the Lower West Side deserve their own heritage trail sign on Washington Street, as we've been patiently advocating for a decade now. Initially, the Alliance told CV1 that the problem was DOT was refusing to consider any new signs, as they told you again this morning. But we've learned this is false. And the reasoning is the Alliance simply doesn't want to do it and is content to maintain a network that continues to exclude almost all history west of Broadway, frankly, in a discriminatory way, especially the immigrant neighborhoods destroyed for transportation to build the Battery Tunnel. With the Alliance's disrespectful commitment to ignore the community board's resolution on this matter, we advanced the full critique. This item should be tabled. They're black and white photos. The text isn't legible. It's badly written, wordy. Please do serious review of the actual text this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Lily Murad?
Mute. Hello, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Hi, I would like to say, that my grandparents came over and raised families on Washington Street. I'm a tour guide. I give tours of that area. And all my pictures, all the letters from my uncles serving in the South Pacific have the address of 42 Washington Street and the tenement that my mother and her family and her family's family all grew up in. I would greatly appreciate that you would give a lot more consideration to giving the signage, its comeuppance, basically what it really deserves. It really is a phenomenal community that did exist. And that's all I'd like to say, is that I would like to think we could maybe do a little bit better than from what I understand, just a few lines about the community. It does deserve its own signage for the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next person is Arthur Piccolo.
Good morning, commissioners. Am I on?
Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, commissioners. I submitted to each of you, both at the commission, and I tried to reach you individually with my 7-page report.
I was on. Now I just got.
Hello.
Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, commissioners. I submitted a 7-page report to all of you late last week, strongly urging you to reject this proposal. As I point out in my statement, how you respond to this proposal is far more important to PDC, its mandate, and the city than it might appear to some. It is an historic opportunity for PDC to set a necessary standard for New York City and do much more to create a far better streetscape and city post-COVID-19. As far as DOT's support for this proposal, let's put that in perspective. DOT simply passed judgment on what was submitted to them by the Alliance. Their review had to do with the structural integrity of the signage and that it meted certain streetscape requirements in the city. They did not pass judgment on the contents of these signs, as the Alliance would like you to believe. Community Board 1, a number of their committees, Parks and Waterfront Committee, a number of months ago, rejected this proposal overwhelmingly, only to have it back on the agenda the next month at the urging of the president of Community Board 1, who has a major conflict in also being a member of the board of the Alliance. The Community Board asked for, others asked for the report that you have received with the exact wording of the storyboards. They were refused for a very specific reason. Had these storyboards been submitted to the Community Board, that would have been a central issue they would have used in whether or not to reject it a second time. It was a very calculated move on the part of the Alliance not to do so. As far as the sign, the historic sign, as far as the wayfare markers, I think you can approve those. That's a totally separate issue than the historic storyboards. Think of what we're looking at. At Bowling Green, the most historic place in all of New York City by many people's standards, there is one sign of one storyboard. The Battery, which is also a very historic place, it gets one side of one sign. that storyboard placed in front of the Custom House, all the way up to Broadway, past Wall Street. There is not a single other storyboard. The next one is the storyboard that's devoted completely to a clock on one commercial building. On Wall Street, there are 4 separate storyboards, individual structures, each devoted to one building, one office building. And between Pine Street, Wall Street, and Broad Street, 7 of these structures are devoted to individual buildings, as opposed to the overwhelming rich history of Lower Manhattan. If you were, I believe if you were, and I hope you will, take these storyboards to whether as a commission or individually, ask them to review the content for the richness of it and the completeness of it, and you'll find that it's incredibly deficient. Bowling Green, I submitted as one example, a alternate storyboard for Bowling Green two-sided, which shows so much more of the history. There is even a factual error on the Bowling Green sign, which says that Bowling Green Park was established in 1732. There's no controversy here. Bowling Green Park was established on March 12, 1733. You can find that on the Parks Department site. You can find that right on the brass plaque inside the park.
Thank you, Arthur. Your time is up. Do you have anything to wrap up? Okay, he muted himself. Okay, Jacob Morris. I don't know which one of, we'll try this one. Okay, good.
Am I unmuted?
There's some feedback. We have you on, we have 2 videos of you here. That might be the reason. Or do you have YouTube on? Maybe turn YouTube off.
Not sure. Well, let me just turn this off. Okay. I hope I don't run out of time. Okay. Am I okay right now?
I think that's working.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, maybe speak up a little bit more, but go ahead.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. I hope this didn't kill my time. Okay. Okay. Did I lose a whole bunch of time?
Please go ahead.
It is okay. Did I lose a whole bunch of time?
Please go ahead. We'll give you 3 minutes. Start. Or you want us to move on and we'll come back to you?
Okay. I'm going to ask the commission. Oh my goodness.
Jacob, we're going to come back to you.
Okay.
Okay, let's, the next person we have is Adrian Sosin, who I do not see, but if my staff can find, sorry, I'm scanning, I do not see Adrian Sosin. Okay. How about Reverend Carpin?
I think Reverend Carpin may have signed up for the Roosevelt Monument.
Oh, sorry, okay. Mariama James is here. I've asked to unmute.
Hi, I am here. Thank you.
Great, go ahead.
I'm a Black and Native area resident and community board one member. I'm actually their treasurer and quality of life co-chair. And I actually reintroduced the idea of signs of this type at the recorded May 2020 Quality of Life meeting following the murder of George Floyd. The then chair, Anthony Notaro, supported the idea of pursuing signage, marking the district's historical sites, and serving to educate the neighborhood's non-Black populace on the origins of the area. In June, we elected our current chair, Tammy Meltzer, and she too supported the idea, adding that it would be passed along to Waterfronts and Culture. Fast forward a year later to April 2021, the item appeared on the board's agenda, and even the description was disrespectful and indicative of the Black community groups not having been included. The Downtown Alliance's presentation before our Waterfronts and Culture Committee was so offensive and traumatizing that I left the meeting, but continued to receive texts and phone calls from other members who were also quite bothered by what they were hearing. The Alliance hadn't made any attempt to engage with the community in general at large, the Black community specifically, Black history experts, the Schomburg Museum, the Harlem Historical Society, the African Burial Ground, etc., or even the Black Board 1 members. Consequently, the item did not pass a resolution at that May meeting. While many community members remained dissatisfied, it did pass CB1 in May. The proposal continues to offend and traumatize, however. Much of the very important history, like the slave market, is out of context, displaced, and just outright incorrect, and therefore perpetuates miseducation and is disrespectful. The addition of so-called diversity comes at the expense of the Black history for which the Heritage Trail was intended. No one's against diversity, no one's against inclusion and adding additional sites, but that doesn't mean that you don't complete in a proper way 20 years later the project that you set out to do 20 years ago and didn't have the care or concern to even complete or do right at the first time. Now you have a second chance and you're making it worse. So I agree with those that asked that it be tabled. I wasn't aware that that was a possibility, but having heard it, I support that. Tabling it and revisiting this whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person we have on the list is Joseph Svelak.
He's a 347 number, and you'll have to press *6, I believe.
Okay, let's see. Joseph, if you can hear us, if you can unmute yourself, *6 on your phone.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Great.
Begin.
Okay, thank you. I'm a licensed New York City tour guide, a founding member of the Friends of the Lower West Side, dedicated to preserving the unique immigrant history of downtown Manhattan. I'm referring to the area south of Chambers Street. My Moravian immigrant family settled there in the early 1900s with many other nationalities seeking a better life in the New World. In my over 70-some years of walking these streets, I've seen about a third of Lower Manhattan below Chambers Street disappear, with major eminent domain actions displacing thousands of working class residents and hundreds of their businesses. These various immigrant groups and their descendants lived in remaining converted federal townhouses and tenements, mostly along the waterfronts from the Brooklyn Bridge down to State Street, and then up from Battery Park to the World Trade Center site. Over time, their homes were also being replaced by commercial development. The area north of Battery Park and to the west of Broadway, up to the current World Trade Center site, was also known as Little Syria, for its Middle Eastern population of Arabs, Greeks, and Armenians. By the 1880s, they would integrate the Lower West Side area, where from 1840s on, waves of Irish and Germans had settled. By the early 1900s, the area now had a Slavic majority, mostly Slovaks, Russians, Poles, Ukrainians, and others coming from the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. A 1917 survey counted 27 nationalities living in the small, unique, vibrant community, many walking to work in the service industries of the financial district or the commercial waterfront industries. They had various businesses, churches, and social organizations. I refer you to the websites of the Friends of the Lower West Side and Washington Street Historical Society for books, documentaries, and oral histories of this mostly forgotten neighborhood. Their heritage of tolerance and integration over a century ago is a lesson for all of us. We need a plaque to honor a unique immigrant community whose history has been erased through redevelopment. One misleading sign about Little Syria isn't enough, okay? There seems to be no social justice when government actions destroy viable working class neighborhoods, and now government-funded organizations don't at least preserve its unique history. The redoing of heritage trail signs should now include one in an appropriate place on Washington Street, in particular near the former Syrian church, to honor this unique history. Community Board 1 passed a resolution to this effect in 2013. We are still patiently waiting. If anyone would like a free 2-hour walk about New York City's most historic, diverse, old immigrant neighborhood, send me an email, Joe Svelak, JoeSvehlak @live.com. Be happy to show you around. Thank you for your upgrading the signs. I think they need a lot of extra upgrading in terms of content and placement. I look forward to working with you on representing this little-known important immigrant history of Lower Manhattan. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to try
Okay.
Jacob Morris again. I see he's in a different format here. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Am I okay now?
Yes, great.
Oh, good. Okay. Sometimes simpler is better. Okay, I'm going to ask that the commission table this proposal by the Downtown Alliance. And I'm going to ask that they do it one of two ways, that you just table it for resubmission by the Alliance to fix major bad history, which, if approved in the current design proposal, will embarrass the Public Design Commission, because, this signage is going to last for at least 25 years, and it's going to be viewed by millions of people. And what you have is, you have a deceptive and duplicitous and manipulation of the process by the Downtown Alliance. And the Downtown Alliance is not alone in the way they manipulate the process, and even manipulate you, the Public Design Commission. And you shouldn't allow it, which means that when they do it, an incomplete, as pointed out by Mr. Piccolo, when they do an incomplete, very incomplete submission to the community board, where they refuse to reveal the full content of their proposal to the community board, and said, well, we're just updating and upgrading the existing content and signage. And then they put things on, and I happen to be an authority on the Black history of downtown Manhattan, and especially in regards to the abolitionism and Underground Railroad. And you have things like Elizabeth Jennings Graham getting thrown off the streetcar in 1854. And they have that basically like 7 blocks away from where she got thrown off. An incredible disconnect. A fundamental violation even of city council guidelines, which call for on street namings for the name proposed for a street name to be connected to the person's life, in work, home, or a major event in their life. The guidelines in the city council call for that. This disconnect between the content of the signs and the location of the signs is bad history. It's confusing, and it's going to be embarrassing to you, the commission. I'm hoping that you set forth a new procedure where you do not allow these agencies and entities to submit stuff to the Design Commission unless it is properly submitted in its totality to the community boards before they bring it to you. You guys know as well as anybody that they do, like fast submissions, like 1 or 2 days before, and then they.
Thank you, Jacob. Your
On your
time's up.
calendar. Do not allow this in the future, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next person on our list is Megan Malvern.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
I'd just like to point out to the commissioners that when people walk down the streets and see these signs, this will be fact for people who are reading them for the first time. Listening to what has been said before me by Jacob and Mariama and Todd, I'm realizing that I don't know enough to know how wrong some of these things are. And I just want to point that out, that I think that's a huge obligation for the commission to remember that you are writing down history that people will look at as fact. And so I think that we should go the extra mile and make sure that it is really reflective of what actually happened. I just wanted to point out that the designs break with the original and well-known look that follow long established the circle around the eye. That's a New York City like standard. When you're looking for a subway and you look up and you see that circle, that means information, that means direction. That is New York City at its like core. And I think the rebranding to the square is exactly that. It's rebranding for the Downtown Alliance, which I think is already prominently displayed in the lower right-hand corner. And I also think that it is rebranding with the red banner on the top. It's distracting. And when I was looking at the before and afters, I didn't understand what the signs were meant for. The befores very clearly say, explore Lower Manhattan. That's what brings you in, and that's what makes you understand that you're about to learn something. The explore Lower Manhattan is T9C and obscured by the big glaring red line on the top that clearly is just another history, like another rebranding of the Alliance with their red line. The contents of the sign should be put up for review with CB1, enhance the connections to the real downtown that these people and places know. There are mistakes and omissions that CB1 and Black history experts of Lower Manhattan have already pointed out, and they need to be fact-checked and really changed. I just want to point out that I think to recap, the content of the sign should be reviewed. The circle, it should remain a circle around the eye because that's iconic New York. And what it is as a subject line should be prominently displayed, explore Lower Manhattan. The obnoxious red bar, I think, is distracting. And I think that all of these thoughts should be brought into consideration and that the whole thing should be tabled and redesigned and brought back. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. The next person is Virginia Stotts. And I've asked you to unmute. Virginia, you can start. Virginia, go ahead. We can't hear you for some reason. It might be your microphone. Virginia, we're gonna go on to the next person. Maybe you can check your microphone. Okay, Stacy Hub.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to thank Mariama for her comments earlier, and I wanted to echo them, but from the other side. As a white person living at the South Street Seaport Historic District for 25 years, I was embarrassed and mortified that I knew nothing about the significant role the Seaport played in the slave trade. And my daughter managed to get all the way through graduation in downtown Manhattan, knowing nothing of it either. When I heard that signage would be redone, I was excited. What an opportunity to tell some difficult and more inclusive stories in an inventive way. However, upon review, I am saddened and I'm angry that instead of seizing on this moment, once in a generation chance, we're simply updating signs in what feels like a very rushed, haphazard, and actually non-inclusive way. Yes, we had one person of color putting their perspective on it and throwing in a few words, but that simply does not make it much more inclusive. I love the introductions earlier about inclusivity, LGBTQ, et cetera, but I actually don't see it in the finished results. What I do feel is it's more of a signage grab for the Downtown Alliance for branding, replacing the signs that are there with their red stripe and updating it somewhat. There are errors. Not all of the buildings downtown in the Seaport are from the 18th century. The photos are no longer in color. The locations are wrong. There are typographical errors. They refer to the South Street Seaport Historic District by the trademark Howard Hughes name, the Seaport District. The fact that they chose to highlight the Food Emporium and Entertainment District over actually telling the story at the seaport of the slave ships is frankly disgusting. I agree, they're falling into disrepair. Remove them. Take your time. Send this back to CB1 with the full text, which we did not have. Please do it the right way and don't rush it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Virginia, do you want to start? Do you want to try again? Let's see. I don't know. She might be having a problem with her microphone. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. So I do see that, Virginia, I'm sorry we can't hear you, but I see that in the form you did say that you're in favor of rewording and the correction of sign proposed for Bowling Green and or additional sign to be placed in a more appropriate spot to commemorate the area of Little Syria. Is that, okay, I'm sorry, your microphone isn't working. Okay, we'll put that for the record. We have that. Okay, thank you. Let's see, sorry. We have Adrian Sosin and Al Cohen, but they are not here as far as I can see. So that is it for, sorry, I'm just scanning the room. Okay. Okay, Signe, I believe we're done with public testimony. Sorry.
Is Richard Bro a potential person who wants to speak? Had he signed up?
No, but I see I just asked him to unmute.
Okay.
Richard, did you want to testify?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
My apologies. Sorry, I'm in a public space. So, hello, my name is Richard Bro, and I'm an associate professor of ethnic studies at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. I am speaking before this committee today to say that proposed new signage network in Lower Manhattan has been hastily put together and full of errors, inaccuracies, and glaring omissions. I am asking the Public Design Committee to table the current proposed signage and consider the work of proper experts to create additional signage highlighting the social importance of neighborhoods like Lower Manhattan's Little Syria or the Syrian Colony, once centered around Washington Street from Battery Place North to Liberty Street. This neighborhood is currently represented by 3 buildings: the facade of St. George's Syrian Melkite Catholic Church, a tenement, and the downtown community house. Many people rightly focus on the diverse ethnic history of Little Syria, including Arabs, Turks, Greeks, and Armenians, and this became home to dozens of Arabic language newspapers. Perhaps most importantly, Little Syria was the hub for Arab immigrant and Arab American cultural expression, including the authors, poets, and visual artists of the Pen League. The Pen League members included the likes of Khalil Gibran, Amin Rahani, Mikhail Naimi, and Nasiba Arida. The cultural output of the Pen League members is only one aspect of life that could and should be highlighted on properly researched and more carefully conceived signage. Indeed, Washington Street became home to 3 Arabic language phonograph record labels or companies including Abraham J. Maqsood Records, Alexander Malouf's Malouf Records, and Farid Alam Aldin's Alam Phone Records. I have been fortunate enough to be one of several historians and ethnomusicologists working to help preserve the voices and stories of Arab Americans who sang and spoke of love, loss, home, humor, God, and country, the ones these individuals left in a collapsing Ottoman Empire, and the one to which they arrived, the United States of America. Musicians and business people like Alexander Malouf had one of his compositions adopted by several school boards across the US to be sung at patriotic assemblies in our public schools and considered to become the US national anthem between 1912 and 1923. Fred Alam, who founded his record company at 81 Washington in the late 1930s, was among those Arab Americans displaced by the Brooklyn Barbie tunnel construction. And like many residents of Little Syria, had to transplant his operation to Brooklyn Syrian neighborhood, where it produced hundreds of records through 1961. During World War II, the US State Department contracted Alam Phone Records to provide music for the Voice of America radio program. The Arabic service program ran from 1942 to 1945. Alam also encouraged Arab Americans, some 16,000, to buy war bonds and to support the Allied Forces V campaign. These are important stories which cannot be reduced to a single sentence on the current proposed signage. To conclude, a sign with one sentence at Bowling Green is inaccurate in terms of its reference to the location of Little Syria and is not sufficient for the vast, important history of the Syrian Quarter and the Lower West Side as a whole. We ask that the Public Design Commission table the overall approval of the project until this matter can be resolved. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for recognizing me and allowing me to speak.
Thank you. And we have, I think, one more person named Esther.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. I thought I applied to speak and apparently my name wasn't on there. I just want to point out that 20 plus years ago when these signs were first put up, the Lower West Side was entirely overlooked. I don't know who made those decisions, but they were totally misguided, as everyone here has already testified. I think there needs to be more money in this budget. There needs to be more time. They need to add signage where appropriate, and they need to change text where appropriate, and it needs approval by the community board. The community board has supported signage for the Lower West Side, AKA Little Syria, in the past, and that should be respected. We should not have to apply ourselves, as was suggested. That's a lot of work on our part. We're volunteers. We shouldn't have to do that. The Downtown Alliance should take that on. And there needs to be, if they're trying to do it quickly and cheaply, which to me, that's what it seems like, they need to maybe put more money in the budget and get it done properly. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And it does look like that concludes our testimony, Signe.
Thank you, members of the public. That was very informative and helpful. I believe that there are several commissioners who'd like to give some opinions, maybe questions. Please begin, whoever would like to start.
I'll start. Thank you for the presentation. Also, really, especially thank you to the members who testified here, who took the time to come and speak to us. I think that you presented very intelligent and heartfelt testimony today, and I concur with much of it. I agree that we need proper experts, and no offense to Ms. Daywood, I feel that there's a responsibility of the Downtown Alliance to put, as was said, more time and more resources towards this project. I think what was submitted, the group that had the 10 reasons to rethink the Downtown Alliance historical signage, the Washington Street Advocacy Group, had some great critical points that we will take to heart, or I will take to heart. I speak as an individual here, and I concur with those points.
Other commissioners?
Signe, I'd like to speak.
Yes, please, Deborah.
This last year has shown us that we all need to tell our own stories. If nothing else, that the year has shown us that. And so I agree that this project needs to be sent back. There need to be additional historians, and it should be a collaborative process. Perhaps the Downtown Alliance can seek input from those who speak authentically to the stories that are being told, like the Schomburg Center or the Museum of the American Indian, as just two examples. And so would recommend that this going forward be rethought as a more collaborative process, and that I would offer that PDC should review the text after the Alliance has revisited this with additional input from those who speak authentically to the stories that are being told.
Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else? Any other commissioners care to speak up? Ken Seth?
Yes, I'd like to chime in that I did not read all of the signposts, and the ones that I did read, I was deeply saddened. And so I think, we can do a lot better. And I mean, it hurts as people of color to see your history constantly either overlooked or functionally not presented. And I think fundamentally, I work as an artist, and I present work about Revolutionary era New York. And New York is a slave state. And 10% of the population was enslaved in 1776. It's a lot of slavery. And all of that is in this area. The very basic facts about the Wall and Wall Street being where the slaves were being sold, and so much of the slave trade in the South actually coming through New York through our ports. I think it's really hard to see what is obviously well intended. It's like no one came with bad intentions, but it hurts, and it hurts people to continue to erase history. Not to mention that there are so many resources out there now that one could reach out to and partner with. And I agree with Deborah, and I agree with Lori. I mean, this has to be collaborative, and that collaborative conversation has to happen before you come back to PDC. And that, I read, one, and then I had a huge question after reading that one. Then I needed to read the second one, and I had huge questions after reading the second signage. And then I was like, I can't read them all right now. And if I do, I will find many more things that I can't understand. And obviously I want to see this done well. And everyone wants to see this done well. This is a group effort. And we will support in any way that we can. And, obviously Museum of American Indian, and there's like Black Gotham, who do walking tours in downtown all the time. And there's so many resources. So I really want to just say that I support that this be done well, and in due course, revisit it.
I also want to mention and second or third from everyone who is of the commissioners who have spoken, that this is a moment for not just this country, but also for this commission to really recognize the opportunity to make things right where we have the power to do so. And if this project is an opportunity for some truth and reconciliation, we should make sure that it is truthful and historically accurate, and that it is sensitive to the indigenous communities, the African community, the cultural history of the downtown area, and not be motivated by a quick turnaround and strategized by the Downtown Alliance. I think that before PDC sees it, I think that the community board one should have an opportunity to see the full text and information and to get approval by community board before PDC does the same. And I also will second the access to accurate and thoughtful consideration to historians from Schomburg, from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, as well as the Smithsonian and Museum of American Indian, which is right next downtown. And there's a plethora of historians that can give you feedback, thoughtful and considered, and about not just the accuracy, but also the sensitivity to the language. So I would urge you to make sure that that is accurate and thoughtful and sensitive before returning back to PDC, and absolutely get the approval of the community board before coming back.
Signe,
Thank you,
I'm
Mary.
going to unmute Jessica Lappin.
Thank you, Carrie. I just want to correct a few things that have been said inaccurately on the record, and then, we can sort of go from there unless people have questions. But first of all, I've spent over 20 years in civic life and public service as Speaker to the City Council, to Gifford Miller, as Chief of Staff, as a member of the City Council, and here. I have never been deceitful. I've never been manipulative, and I have never been discriminatory. And so I felt that it was important, since I was accused of that at the beginning of this during testimony, for me personally, setting aside the alliance. I think it's important to set the record straight, setting apart any discussions we have about the substance of the project. That's not how I've ever conducted myself, and what I like to think is a long life of public service. First of all, a lot of the testimony was focused on a sign for Little Syria. I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. We cannot add new signs. We're not given the authority to do that. We have tried to facilitate, as Todd knows, a discussion with DOT to help them along that path as part of a phase 2, if phase 1 of this got approved, which it sounds like it may or may not. But we cannot add signs. We can't add signs on Washington Street. We can't add signs in the Seaport, which is not within our catchment area, by the way. We don't have that authority. So that's not in the package before you today, because we don't have the ability to do that. And I just want to be very crystal clear about that. We can't just move signs. So we were asked to include information about Little Syria. We put it on a sign as close as we could. Now we're being attacked for doing so. We can't just move that sign. So we were trying to be responsive to what we heard from the community. The same on Wall Street. So the sign is by 40 instead of 48. It's as close as we could get. So again, I want to be very clear. DOT has actually forced us over the years to remove signs as links have gone in because of other street issues below grade. Very hard to cite things here, actually. So, and that's part of the reason why the design is what it is. DOT was concerned that if we altered the design too much, we wouldn't be able to replace them in the ground physically. So I just want to be clear about that. We've spent well over $100,000 this year alone on this process, setting aside the amount of staff time we have spent and the amount of time we have spent over 20 years maintaining them. So I just wanted that to be sort of put out there and clear. We have reached out to Schomburg. I reached out to Tony Marks personally. We did not hear back. Vis-a-vis Black Gotham experience, as you may or may not know, we've worked with Cuomo. In fact, for Black History Month, we did an extensive series with him that is online, that was podcast, that we're actually quite proud of. And so we certainly work with him. And I wanted to sort of mention that to you, Commissioner Armstead. We have great respect for him, and we work very closely with him, and we have certainly been engaged and involved in having discussions. So I wanted to create a slightly fuller picture. Again, we're not historians, so we went to what we thought, the Museum of the City of New York. This is what they do. And this woman is an internationally renowned scholar, and we take her work quite to heart. So, I mean, there are many other sort of points. And I did also want to close by saying CB1 did approve this. There was back and forth, which I thought was good. we were responsive. We incorporated most of their changes. So, just in terms of people saying you need to come back with community board's approval, we have the community board's approval. Not everybody approved, not everybody will approve. And again, this is history. Not everybody's going to approve about the wording of anything. But, we have certainly, and I do also want to appreciate what Commissioner Armstead said, we have taken this on. To be honest, I didn't really anticipate that it would sort of become what it is. We took these over 25 years ago to be nice stewards. We have debated what to do about them over the years. It costs us money and time. The city has forced us to take them out one by one, even before they started falling apart. So it's sort of where we are. We have made our best effort. We've tried hard. And at some point, that's sort of where we're at. We thought we were doing a nice thing. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Jessica. Phil, did you want to say something?
No, only, I don't think anyone wants to make any kind of personal attack. Certainly no one on the commission wants to do that. But I mean, it's clear from both the people we heard from in the public and from the really incredibly personal and heartfelt sentiments expressed by the commissioners that for whatever reason, this is simply an unsuccessful proposal. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. It is more hurtful than helpful. It has flaws in both the design of the signs themselves, the change in sort of logo from citywide to bid logo. It contains too many errors of fact to be endorsed by a public body such as ours, which is ultimately responsible for approval of public signs and monuments. And then, the process itself was, whether relevant to us or not, seemingly deeply flawed. Whether it was approved by the community board, certainly there was enough articulation that the community board didn't have all of the facts and the language of the specific signs. I mean, the fact that you can't add signs, I understand is problematic, but that's a problem and it has to be addressed and embraced. And you may have to go back to DOT and say, we're not going to remain stewards of these signs unless we can make them what they should be. And that's really all we're asking for. We're asking for a higher level of sensitivity, inclusivity, positivity about what's in front of the public, which is what is the Public Design Commission's responsibility. And it may be a good try, but unfortunately, from at least my perspective, it's not a successful try. And therefore, I can do nothing but vote negatively, because I think it needs to be rethought and reworked in a way that embraces and responds more clearly to much of what you've heard today.
Thank you, Phil. Are there any other commissioners who'd like to speak up?
I just wanted to add one more thing, and I thought I highlighted, and I'd like to highlight again that I think this was done with the very best of intentions, and that is really what is most hurtful when things are done. It's clearly not personal, but it is, regardless of the fact that it was done with great intentions, it is quite hurtful. So I just want to reemphasize that I think that this was brought to the table in the most genuine way to do well for people, but it has not. Thank you, Ms. Lippin.
And also, we should just consider this as a moment, like Signe said, to do it the right way and to represent it in a way where all people have an opportunity to step up to the plate and do the best for the city, because it is going to be a generational post that's going to be seen by not just local communities, by international people who come and visit. And it would be really horrible to have this be a not just local marker, but historical marker for people abroad who may come to it and then say, well, this is not historically accurate. This is not the whole story. And then, we look like we don't know what we're doing. And I'm not able to accept something like that.
I will attempt to summarize. I'm torn between whether we should reject or table this proposal. There's a side of me that would like to reject it for a variety of reasons. One, essentially to urge DOT and the Downtown Alliance to think more carefully about the location of these signs. They, looking at that plan, and this is the historic markers, not the information signs. Looking at that plan, they're rather limited to Broadway and Broad Street, which really doesn't tell the history of Lower Manhattan. And I would also say that I was quite appalled in the statement that you made that you've left out Native Americans who were here before any people of any other color showed up. And the lack of even identifying places of significance to Native Americans, I think, is a real oversight. So that said, I would like to reject it on the basis of the fact that we need to rethink the location of signs, the number of signs, the stories that are being told, where they're being told, and about what they are being told. And maybe at the end of the day, maybe this isn't the right thing to do, but we are at a pivotal moment in our history where many white people have come to understand that history is not being told accurately. How are we going to rewrite history? How are we going to tell these stories in a convincing, truthful, honest way that helps rewrite the wrongs? That's RIGHT, rewrite the wrongs. It's a very, very difficult challenge. We each have to apply ourselves to this, no matter what we do. I'm a professor as well. So this is something that consumes me. And so it's not something to be rushed into. I completely concur with everyone who said this should not be rushed into. I mean, I'm sure that there is a motivation on your part, you, the Downtown Alliance. The signs are falling apart. They're hazards. Tourism's coming back to the city. You want, a general refresh of Lower Manhattan, but this just is not the right thing to be rushing into. If you would like us to separate the the informational signs from these historic signs and approve those, we will consider that. But I guess I have to look to our executive director as to whether it is whether we reject or table. As I said, my motivation to reject is a very, very serious, as I believe all of the commissioners who have spoken have said, as well as members of the public, that this isn't just change a couple words here and there. So, Carrie, what is the implication of rejecting versus tabling to the applicant? You'd think I'd know this after this many years, but I don't.
Well, I think for tabling, typically we table when we're not kind of prejudiced against it being resubmitted, of course, with conditions. As you've noted, rejection is a bit stronger. I'm not sure that I'm hearing that people don't want any of these signs, but they do support, kind of more research and more consultation with a broader base of historians and kind of broader inclusivity. And so it's not that you're, it sounds like a table with, with openness for resubmission with certain conditions. I do also think it would be, it seems, if commissioners agree, we could separate out the wayfinding, the columns and the light pole, if you want to, from the heritage trail aspect of it, if that's helpful.
Well, no, I think that should come back as a standalone proposition.
Mm-hmm.
But my feeling is it goes beyond just us, some of us feeling that these signs are okay if they're written much more collaboratively, intelligently, and historically accurately. I'm opposed to them because they're not in the right place, and that we can't tell these stories properly if the sign is on Broadway. How are we going to, it just doesn't make sense. How are we telling stories about Native Americans? How are we telling stories about Little Syria? How are we telling stories about the South Street Seaport when the sign is in the wrong place? So that's why that's one of the reasons that I'm highly agitated. Ethel,
I agree
did you
with
want to
Sydney.
say something? Oh, sorry, Mary.
I just said I agree with Sydney. I think it's I would vote to reject the project, to revisit location and design, as well as content and sensitivity to communities, the original communities, as well as the African communities and local communities that lived in the area.
Ethel?
Can you hear me? Is that okay? Yeah. I did not plan to speak because all my colleagues I'm sorry, is that not working? Yeah, okay. All my colleagues were completely correct and passionate, and I agreed. Until now, I want to add that the role of DOT, as narrated here, is one that has not been helping us to understand, helping the process, does not appear to be clear, and we need to have the veto things. That's what we heard from Jessica. This does not work if we're doing something for the entire district and they are vetoing in ways that are not clear and going against these other extremely important, passionate, and rational objections from so many people and from my colleagues. So I would want to have I would reject and include that there has to be a collaboration and understanding with DOT as well as to location, size, and all the rest of it.
Thank you, Ethel. Actually, Nick, our liaison at DOT, would like to say something about that.
Hi, yeah, can everybody hear me? Is this okay? Great. And thank you, Commissioner Sheffer. I appreciate that concern. I do want to be very clear, and I've stated this at the community board, I've stated this a couple times. DOT is an agency. We do not design, fabricate, install, or maintain historic signage, right? That is not something that, as a mandate, as an agency, we have the capacity to do. However, we are happy to review and take through the process, the appropriate approval process, proposals that come before us. So I think if there is a proposal from any group throughout the city, right, whether it's Lower Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, we do take that very seriously, and we are happy to look at all of the various constraints. DOT's interest is, of course, very much in public safety and ensuring that the sign meets our criteria from a siting perspective, and that there is ultimately a group that is responsible for the maintenance of those signs, right? From there, then we obviously advise on the remainder of the process, going through the community board, going through the design commission or landmarks, depending on where the signs are being proposed. So with that said, again, I think we are happy to review a revised proposal. We are happy to look at alternate locations. I think we were very much supportive of ADNI's proposal here, given the deterioration of the current signs. I think there's very much a demonstrated need to address those that exist. I think obviously, as Jessica had mentioned, there are a lot of sighting constraints in Lower Manhattan that makes installing signs very difficult. That said, again, we're happy to look at additional locations. We're happy to review that and see what is feasible. I think the agency takes that responsibility very seriously, and again, have no issue in doing that. We don't have the capacity, obviously, to design or install or maintain those kinds of signs. So we do very much rely on other entities, community groups, to bring these kinds of proposals to us, and we want to make sure that we're evaluating them and making sure that there's something that could be successful for the long term, and obviously relying very much on this process also to have these kinds of dialogues. So I hope that clarifies, at least to some extent, the agency's role and where we've been.
That's very helpful, Nick. I mean, it may be the Downtown Alliance mentioned at some point during the presentation that the QR code would be hopefully providing additional information in the future. I mean, it may be that the best thing to do is to put a marker with a QR code and have this richer history, which is very hard to write and tell the fullness of the stories in the written word, which only if you speak English anyway would you understand. So perhaps it's available in multiple languages, and maybe it's just a single stanchion that has less utility interference. I mean, this needs to be completely rethought. I would like a commissioner to make a motion to either to reject this proposal.
I would like to make the motion to reject, but I also would like to say that, the idea that we're missing out, I mean, no matter what's on the signs are always going to be shorthand. We are missing that deeper component about the fact that when people walk away from these signs, there are all these resources that they could be directed toward that are very long lasting and that can be life-changing and affirming. And I think that the rejection is helpful in that it would be more helpful to not have them than to have them and not move history forward.
I agree.
I would just add.
I want to say thank you to all the people who put resources in to making this happen to this point. But I think that, we're not even halfway. And I think that we're not tired. I don't think Muhammad Ali would have said that he was tired while George Foreman was beating on him, because he needed to win. And he needed to take those shots. And I don't think that, Harriet Tubman was tired when she realized that there were more Africans to be liberated. And I think we're not tired either. I think we've got to keep going. So we got to keep going with this. Thank you. I'm a motion to reject.
Yeah, I second, and I think it's an incredible opportunity to revisit all of this, and that the fact that we have the signs we have, just adding a QR to Signage, I think is not enough. I think that they already represent something we need to rethink completely. So I move to reject.
Okay, so now we're going to do this in a procedural way. We have a motion on the table to reject. Phil. Oops. There we go.
Yeah, I approve to reject.
Ken Seth.
I reject.
Lori.
Reject.
Deborah.
Reject, and I want to just offer the idea to the Alliance and to DOT and others who are working on whatever the next iteration of this might be, that it could be thought of, as you suggested, Signage, completely rethought from the ground up, with access to deeper stories and potentially thought of as a prototype so that it can be iterative and maybe reconceived as something that needs to be tried in different ways over time. But yes, vote to reject.
Karen,
Vote to reject.
Ethel,
To reject.
Meryl, if she's still here.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah, great.
I want to say I vote to reject, but there's a caveat here. I don't want to dismiss the work that has been done to this point and have people ascribe bad motivation to it, right? So I think to go back at it with a wider lens and a deeper dive is a really important message for this group to send. And is for those reasons that I reject it. I am not insulting the people who put it forward, right? But I am understanding that a wider lens, deeper dive is needed with more expertise.
Thank you, Meryl. Mary?
I move to reject and hope that there's a greater consideration to the original people of this land and that their history and inclusion be really considered properly and thoughtfully.
Thank you. And I also reject, and I'll just reiterate my personal add-on here, which has to do with the location of the signs and therefore the stories that can be told. And that was very gracious of Meryl to say what she did. And I think we all concur that this is not to be taken as a slap in the face, but really an opportunity to, a rare opportunity that to think about how history should be told, and that so much of history has been half told or even not told correctly. So, but again, if your organization would like to separate out the other signs, speak to the staff and we will help push that forward. Thank you. So now we're moving on to the last public hearing item, which is 27828, the removal and temporary storage of the Theodore Roosevelt Monument from the American Museum of Natural History. I want to note that Commissioner Sheffer is recused, so she'll be leaving the meeting as of now. So per standard procedure, the applicants will give their presentation. There'll be public testimony, and then we will ask questions, deliberate, and vote. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, we should unmute Sam, Dan Slippin, Rolando, Carrera, Lakin. And Dan, I've given you, I've requested you to control the screen. As I understand, you'll be advancing the slides for everybody.
Thank you. I think I have it.
Okay, so you can test it out if you want. And then we're ready to begin whenever your team is.
All right, I can get started if that's okay with everyone. Thank you, President Nielsen.
Hold on, Sam. Let me get control of this screen.
All right.
You are controlling Grace.
It says you're controlling my screen, but maybe, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you. Very good.
All right. Thank you, President Nielsen. Thank you, Director Butler, and I want to thank all of the PDC for having us here today. My name is Sam Biederman. I'm Chief of Staff and Assistant Commissioner at NYC Parks, and I join my colleagues at the American Museum of Natural History to present to the Commission the proposal for the removal and relocation of the equestrian statue of Theodore Roosevelt from the main entrance of the American Museum of Natural History. You all know where this museum is. It's located on the Upper West Side neighborhood of Manhattan. but this is just to situate you. This is a view of the sculpture in its current location on Central Park West. And here is another view as museum visitors approach the artwork. The artist who designed this piece is James Earl Fraser. Here's another view of the piece. So the city, in partnership with the museum, is proposing what is an incredibly rare action here, but we feel it is the right course of action. As background, in 2018, the Mayoral Commission on City Art, Monuments, and Markers considered historical research about this statue. The commission at that time was unable to reach consensus on this statue due to discord between the significance of Theodore Roosevelt and the racial hierarchy clearly depicted in this statue. In its report, the commission wrote, quote, "Height is power in public art, and Roosevelt's stature on his noble steed visibly expresses dominance and superiority over the Native American and African figures," end quote. Approximately half of the commission advocated to relocate this sculpture, and approximately half of the commission recommended additional historical research before making a decision. Only a few members wanted to keep this statue in place, and even they recommended on-site context be provided. In July 2020, at the request of the Museum of Natural History, and with the support of the Roosevelt family, Mayor de Blasio publicly directed the removal and relocation of this equestrian sculpture of Theodore Roosevelt. Though historical circumstances demonstrate that this sculpture was not erected with malice of intent, the compositional hierarchy has received visually supports a thematic framework of colonization and racism. The city and museum propose relocation by long-term loan to a cultural institution or its grounds dedicated to the life and legacy of Theodore Roosevelt. I would now like to introduce Dan Slippen from the American Museum of Natural History to further elaborate on this proposal.
Thank you, Sam. President Nielsen, Executive Director Butler, thank you for the time. Commissioners, thank you for the time. This slide is a model of the design of the Roosevelt Memorial to be located at the museum. The new wing was designed by architect John Russell Pope, and James Earl Fraser designed the statue, and John Russell Pope designed the granite pedestal for which the statue resides on. The wing officially opened in 1936 with the sculpture being unveiled 4 years later in 1940. This is a copy of the New York Times article on that dedication. The memorial, although part of the overall landmark of the museum, is comprised of the first and second floor of the center building shown here, plus the facade and its bas-reliefs, the plaza and the stairs, and the statue is just one element of the overall memorial.
Dan, I think your volume is, your sound is coming in and out.
That's not good.
Maybe your microphone.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Many view the hierarchical composition of the statue as inherently racist because its visual construct appears to portray the superiority of the white race. Today, the statue's placement greeting visitors to the museum appears to imply an endorsement of its content or perceived content, undermining the museum's mission. As you know, the statue has sustained adverse public reaction and protests for more than 50 years. Both before and after the statue was considered by the Mayoral Advisory Commission on City Art, Monuments, and Markers, the museum spent years working with academics and advisors in a research effort that culminated in a 2019 exhibition about the context and history around the creation of the statue, and also a public reaction to it. The understanding of statues and monuments as powerful and hurtful symbols of systemic racism became even more evident in the wake of the movement for racial justice that emerged after the murder of George Floyd. It has become clear that removing this statue would be a symbol of progress toward an inclusive and equitable community. The museum will continue to be the location of New York State's official memorial to Theodore Roosevelt. Relocating the statue will allow the focus to shift back to the overall memorial instead of the issues raised by the composition of the statute. To discuss the proposal, I would like to introduce Rolando Carrera of Studio Carrera Architects, who is the architect of this application. Rolando?
Yeah, you can hear me? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Rolando Crayer, Principal of Studio Crayer Architects. Good afternoon, President Nielsen, Commissioners. I would like to start by saying that the team at the museum has thought hard and very carefully about the most appropriate design for the replacement of the existing and problematic sculpture with a new design as simple and minimal as possible, which will allow every visitor the opportunity to see the Roosevelt Memorial as a place which is open to all and which they can think about and respond to in their own way. Removing the statue creates an opportunity for a new concept about inclusivity, openness, and welcoming. This concept is represented by a connecting set of stairs from the sidewalk level to the existing plaza, directly aligned with the main staircase to the entry doors. The new set of stairs encompass the full width of the entry triumphal arch between the two center building columns and will have 4 new railings. Next, please. This is a photograph of the existing plaza standing on the plaza looking north. The existing surface of the memorial is made up of 3 different granites with slightly different colors. Next one, please. This is a comparison of the existing plaza and stairs to the proposed design. The existing condition shows the geometrical patterns of the plaza with a combination of the slightly pink and slightly gray granite pavers, while the stairs and the statue base have the slight white tan granite. The proposed paving references the existing, which you see on the right side, references the existing vertical pattern on the south and the north side of the statue in the slightly gray granite pavers. This will act as a field. I'm sorry, can you go back, please? This will act as a field to frame an echo of the relocated sculpture. A bronze ribbon will be set into the stone in the shape of the former statue stone pedestal. Next one, please. These are proposed views showing the new paver pattern on the plaza with the ribbon of the echo flush with the pavers. And the new railings are of a new design using similar bronze as existing, as a subtle distinction between what is existing and what is new. Next one. This is a drawing showing the larger area of the existing plaza and statue stone base. Next. Compared to the new design where the new stairs have been introduced and the echo of the statue pushed back towards the upper staircase. Next one, please. The museum is proposing to add plaques with 2 essential goals. First, to inform visitors of the Theodore Roosevelt Memorial, and second, to recognize the history of the statue and the reason for its removal. Next one. The design will include text bronze plaques set into the plaza at the 2 locations shown here, in the center of the echo and to the lower right-hand side. Right, so the text on the right-hand side is what would be in the center. That central plaque will identify the memorial and the significance of the Theodore Roosevelt. And the smaller plaque that will be to the right side will provide the interpretation for the removal of the statue. I would like to now introduce Lake and Cole of Higgins, Quaysparth and Partners.
Thank you, Rolando. Lake and Cole with Higgins, Quaysparth and Partners. And I would like to conclude with a summary of this proposal according to historic preservation philosophy. It is important to note that this sculpture is a unique case because it is not an independent monument unto itself. Next. The sculpture is one part of a much larger complex, including the Roosevelt Memorial Hall, which is dedicated to the multifaceted legacy of Roosevelt as a person and public figure, and as part of the museum complex, which hosts programs and exhibits in service to its mission. The distinction between the sculpture as a part of a whole is crucial because as a part, the sculpture carries a negative cultural message that compromises the very characteristics that the Memorial Hall is meant to honor, and it conflicts with the museum's public educational mission. So from that standpoint, the removal of the sculpture would not diminish, but rather strengthen the whole. Next. As Rolando noted, this proposal is not only for removal, but also for new designs at the plaza and stairs. These designs will be compatible with the plaza's traditional materials of stone and bronze, but also distinguishable as a modern intervention, visually and conceptually minimalist, while conveying an openness that will allow the opportunity for individual reflection on the removal. Next. The museum has always taken a thoughtful approach to the evolution of its campus, making compatible changes in response to changes in the world around it. The Roosevelt Memorial Hall building itself was a design deviation from the original museum master plan, and the Rose Center has been accepted as a distinguished modern replacement for the old technologically obsolete Hayden Planetarium. Next. We believe that this proposal to remove the existing Theodore Roosevelt sculpture and replace it with the thoughtful design presented to you today is compatible with these past actions and is the correct step toward carrying the museum into the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, presenters. Carrie, do we have any?
Yes, we have Kay Carpin from CB7.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the work you do. All right. I'm Kay Carpin. I co-chair CB7's Preservation Committee. We spent a lot of time reviewing the proposal to remove and relocate the statue, and we looked at all kinds of different options, including chopping the statue up and leaving Teddy to guard the approaches to the museum all by himself. We came up with a resolution that you have before you. Briefly, our community board finds that whatever the original intention of this piece of art, the hierarchical design isn't appropriate to who we are as a diverse community, a diverse neighborhood, and not appropriate to who we want to be. We agree with the museum and the Parks Department and the Roosevelt family, and we firmly urge its removal. We think the community and the museum and the Roosevelt Memorial and the Roosevelt legacy would be better served without the statue. We also considered carefully the proposed redesign of the Memorial Plaza. And we feel that the open plaza with a clear and welcoming straight path into the museum gives a message of inclusiveness. It'll also mirror the approach to the museum's sister institution across the park, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And so Community Board 7 urges the Commission to approve the removal of the Roosevelt statue in its entirety. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carpin. Is there anyone else, Carrie?
No one else has signed up. If I'm missing someone, just, I don't know, raise your hand using the raise. Okay, John Graham. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. Founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual landmarks, interiors, and civic art. The VSNY takes no position on the removal of the bronze sculptural group. However, we strongly object to the removal of the stone plinth. We object to this first because we believe that doing so will eliminate an historic building feature which was part of John Russell Pope's original design. When we reviewed this application, we were surprised to see that the boards didn't include information about the designer of the plinth. However, discovering that the trustees approved the installation of the statue in 1928 prior to the start of building construction in 1929, we believe that Pope would have been involved in the design of this very prominent plinth. In addition, we note that the plinth and the facade are constructed of the same Milford pink granite and are detailed with similar moldings. Second, we object to the removal based on the interaction between facade and plinth. Architects designing classical revival facades often try to enliven them by creating a balance between solids and voids. Here, the deep entrance arch at the top of the stairs is nicely balanced by the projecting plinth set closer to the sidewalk. Removing the plinth will allow the arch to dominate and detract from the overall composition. Third, we object to the proposal to embed the markers in the paving. Locating historic markers in heavily trafficked pavements where they are obscured by snow and leaves and trod upon by people isn't a good idea. Installing the markers at eye level on the sides of the plinth will give them the prominence they deserve. Finally, we believe eliminating the historic plinth will destroy a splendid opportunity for temporary installations, such as those in the niches on the Fifth Avenue facade of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. These installations are contemporary commissions in which the museum invites artists to create new works of art inspired by the collection and, we assume, its sometimes problematic history. With this in mind, removing this literal and figurative platform would be a missed opportunity for significant statements and interpretations of the erstwhile Roosevelt statue, not to mention presumably desired funding and publicity for the museum. Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you. Two very different points of view, both equally well stated. Would commissioners care to comment on this, either position that's been put forth or the recommendation to relocate? Apparently not.
Well, I'll say one thing. I'll say one thing, Signe, just as architect here, that I mean, I would think that one is allowed as an institution, and that an institution can decide to make change and not resort to what always was, so that we don't have to keep the plinth because it was part of the original design. And I respect the museum and their addition for the modern program that they've developed in the future. So I would concur with the proposal set forth by the museum today.
This is Meryl. I would like to say, I want to congratulate the leadership of the museum in how they managed this process. I think they were elegant, they were thoughtful, they were respectful of history, they were forward-leaning, and I give them all the credit in the world. So I accept the recommendation wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Meryl. Yes, it's not often that we see examples of leadership, and clearly this is one of them, especially by an institution of such great reputation and longevity. So I'm going to take a call for Phil. Did you want to say something?
No, I would move to approve.
Okay. I just want to say that should there be approval, a majority approval, if not unanimous, we just need to say a couple of things. That for the standard procedure, we need a written agreement between the Parks Department and I guess the Design Commission on the long-term loan. There'll need to be an assessment of how it can be removed and crated and stored until such time as it is found its new home. And CAG, the Conservation Advisory Group, will continue to be involved. And then finally, the requirement that the relocated, that the site chosen for relocation is publicly accessible and has a relevant connection, as I'm sure you're all aware. So that said, we are going to take a vote to approve. If you choose another option, please do state.
I just wanted to say one thing before we vote.
Yes. Who's that? Yes, Ken said.
And I wanted to speak to Mr. Graham's comment about the opportunity for the museum to use this resource. And one thing that's interesting to me is that we have a history and a tradition of using European models to celebrate our history and to celebrate sculpture and to celebrate how it is that things are done. But by removing the systemic European model of a figural thing on a pedestal, we are opening up even more opportunity for non-traditional or non-European methods of engaging and celebration. So in a sense, removing the whole thing gives even more opportunity, which is one of your main arguments. So I think in some ways, though you've argued to keep some part of it, in a way your argument argues for having more openness and having more opportunity for the institution. And I'm glad that the institution has taken this opportunity to seize upon the action of making more space for different kinds of voices and to celebrate art in a way that isn't in a European model, which is obviously not central to any thought about the history of art in the world. So I think that it's a great thing that we're able to have this jumping off point. And no one really knows what can be put on the remainder of the emptied space, but it's only a limit to put something on what would have remained of the pedestal. And I would now done saying anything, but thank you. And I thank you for your thoughts, Mr. Gray.
Well stated, Kenseth.
Thank you.
Phil.
Approve.
Kenseth.
Approve.
Lori.
Approved.
Karen. Oh, excuse me, I missed Deborah. Sorry, Deborah.
Approve.
Karen.
Approved.
Meryl.
Approved.
And Mary.
Approved.
And myself approved. So it is unanimous approval of the proposal as put forth with the other comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, we're a